The NFL season is over. The Kansas City Chiefs have hoisted the Lombardi Trophy, and teams are now busy building for next year. As I'm recording this video, the Combine is later this week, and the draft is not too far away. So with that all being said, it makes it a perfect time to look forward to which teams next year might be able to make a splash. As you know, every year the NFL is a year-to-year, week-to-week league, meaning teams that performed well last year might actually fall off a cliff next year, and the teams that might have been at the bottom of the league could actually end up in the Super Bowl. With that being said, today I have three teams that I think have the chance to have a breakout 2023-2024 NFL season. What I mean by breakout is they improve their record, and all of these teams I think have a strange outside shot of actually making the playoffs. If you don't see a team that are on here, it might not be because I think they're going to fall off. It could simply be just because, well, I don't know they're in a playoff team, or they're in a tough division, which makes it harder for them to, in fact, become a playoff team. The first team up is the Chicago Bears. They're coming off a very tough season in Chicago that saw them finish with the worst record in the NFL, which also has them securing the number one pick in the upcoming NFL draft. It would be easy for anyone to take a quick glance at the Bears and say that they're heading for another 5-12 or 3-14 season. However, I think anyone that does that really is not seeing the full picture. The Bears discovered this year something extremely important in the NFL, and that is that Justin Fields is a starting QB in the league. After starting rough this season, Fields came on down the stretch and showed signs of a guy that could lead the franchise for the next 10 years. Because Fields' progression has been so impressive and gives so much hope to Chicago, they now have a luxury with the first overall pick in which that they can trade that pick, which I expect them to do. There's been some smoke about them saying they would trade Fields to maybe draft somebody else like a Bryce Young, but I don't see that happening. I think all of that is just a way for them to build up the price so that some other team could swoop in, who is quarterback needy and doesn't have a young signal caller sitting on the roster already, to swoop in, come in, pay a little bit extra, and to get more for Fields, which I think is super smart for them. I think they're going to end up getting a haul for this first pick, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised to see them have maybe two trades. For example, they pick one, but I believe at 3 or 4 is the Colts, who also need a quarterback. There's some other teams. I know the Carolina Panthers are sitting not too far away either. Teams that need to move up to get a guy: Will Levis, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud is another one that could be there. So there could be a scenario where the Bears move back twice, pick up a bunch of extra picks, especially in a year where there's a lot of good offensive tackles later in the draft. There's a lot of good corners. More importantly, receivers. They need to add weapons for Fields. I see the Bears moving back, picking up a lot more picks, picking up more valuable talent for Justin Fields. Not only in the draft, another reason I'm so bullish on the Bears' progress is because they have so much cap space. According to Andrew Branded, the Bears have over $92 million in cap space heading into this year's free agency. Going back to Justin Fields, you're not paying $100+ million, for Justin Fields to be your quarterback. Thus, they can spend that money on other areas to upgrade the team. You're going to throw that in with the fact that they're also going to have a ton of draft picks. I'm even more positive on the Bears. Lastly, and the most important thing I think you have to look at is their division. The Bears playing up there in the NFC North, it's more likely than not that the Packers are going to move from Aaron Rodgers, who really didn't play that great anyway this year. You look at the Detroit Lions, who I think are going to be better next year, and should actually challenge the Bears, but I do not think it's out the realm of possibility for the Bears to have a great offseason and at least be on par with them. And lastly, you have the current division champions in the Minnesota Vikings, who, while yes, had an amazing season, was very tight. They won, I think, 8 or 9 one-score games. It's going to be very tough for that team to do that again. And in the playoffs, as we all saw, the Vikings' defense is extremely suspect. I think any type of extreme offensive improvement, like getting Justin Fields a legit number one wide receiver, would help them compete with the Vikings. With all that being said, I do think that this Bears team, I'm not saying they're world beaters by any means, but I see a situation where they can sneak into the playoffs in the wild card, especially with the new added spot. The next team on my list is the Houston Texans. First, let me just say, I think DeMeco Ryans was a great hire for head coach. This team should be able to turn itself around with him in charge fairly quickly. With that being said, though, the owner has to give him time. The Texans have been notorious here over the past couple of seasons for firing their black head coaches after one season, whether it be David Cutcliffe or this year with Lovie Smith. If DeMeco Ryans is given time, I mean years, 3 to 4 years, because his team does lack a lot of talent, I think they could be in for a big success in the long run. However, the Texans, they did miss out on getting the first pick in this year's draft, and after Davis Mills failed this year to be the Texans' answer at quarterback, they're still going to be hunting for one. However, I still think they're going to get a chance to draft a good signal caller. There's you have CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis. I know some other people are hyped about Anthony Richardson. I am not one, but technically he is still one that you can get. More importantly, they're also loaded with picks because of the Deshaun Watson trade, which when you look at it and considering what Deshaun Watson has become, they came out on the positive side of. They have a whopping 11 picks in this year's draft. 2 of those picks are actually in the top 12, which means they're going to be able to get a quarterback and another impact player. They have over $47 million in cap space available to them as well. And you know, the most important thing, as I said before in the previous entry, is they're in a bad division. The NFC South, granted, I understand that the Jaguars made the playoff. Well, they made it barely above 500. They're not, I would say, a super explosive team as well, and I don't know how much wiggle they're going to get this offseason. Granted, Trevor Lawrence is a problem, but when you look to the other teams in the league, Tennessee is going through it right now. You have another year of people getting older, another year of age for Derrick Henry. Malik Willis is young, but is he going to be ready yet? I still don't understand why they traded A.J. Brown, because when you look at that team, they still needed a great receiver. And obviously, the Colts, the other team in the division, is also in need of a quarterback, and it's a complete mess right now. With that being said, I think Houston, if they find a system where they run the ball really well, and they can get a nice young quarterback, and they hit on their picks, the Texans could make some noise later in the draft. They played hard last year. If you watch their games, despite the record, they played hard. And the NFL is a place, like I said, is a year-to-year league. If the Texans can win some close games, they can also sneak into the playoffs. Number 3 is the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns finished with a 7-10 record last season. However, do not let that record fool you. This team is talented. They are talented at every position, even along the offensive line, the defensive line, secondary, corners, linebackers. They have it. The only thing they are missing is the quarterback. And this entire entry, and I mean this entire entry, is based on one thing that I think is going to happen. And that is Deshaun Watson returning back to his former self, his self that used to be back in Houston after his scandal has kind of subsided here a bit. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not trying to downplay anything that Deshaun Watson has done. It was sick, but I do know this much. He's not getting punished anymore. And I understand how violent it is, and some people say they'll never see him play, they'll never look at him the same. And he will definitely still get booed at every stadium. But if there's one thing I saw, at least with Ben Roethlisberger, and yes, a different situation, but sort of kind of similar crimes here, is that people will forgive you when you win. I think another season removed, coming back from that scandal, now getting a full off season, getting to go into training camp, the preseason actually starting week 1 instead of coming halfway to the end of the season like he did this year. I think Watson gets back into his groove. He already has, I think, a decent connection with Amari Cooper. You still have a nice tight end there, and Njoku, decent offensive line, good offensive weapons. Nick Chubb is still one of the best running backs in the league, so that will take some pressure off of him. I can see the Browns bouncing back next year, and in that division, I still think the Steelers are going to be rebounding. No one knows what's happening right now with the Ravens and Lamar. The Bengals are the Bengals, and the only way I can see this team competing with the Bengals is Deshaun Watson goes back to MVP form level, there. But I don't necessarily see that happening. I see this team finishing somewhere a little bit better than their record this year, and I think they can squeak into the playoffs in that AFC. The AFC is still tough, but I do think they can make it there. And in the playoffs, I think they're a dangerous team to play on. I wouldn't want to play in Cleveland in freaking February. And before the video is fully over, I just wanted to give an honorable mention to the New York Jets. Say they get Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr even, I think that team is loaded as well and can make a big splash in the AFC playoffs. Also, my Washington Commanders, who just missed the playoffs this year with the hiring of Eric Bieniemy and the promise of Sam Howell. I think if the Commanders can do a good job just sewing up the offensive line and drafting a couple good quarterbacks this year in the NFL draft, which there are a ton, they can make some big waves. Still, those two teams in particular, I thought still had other issues that didn't quite put them in the category of the prior 3 teams, whether it be being in divisions that are a little bit tougher or having just steeper hills to climb in general. Either way, I thank you guys for watching. I'm your boy Blitz Pizza. I appreciate you for watching this video. I'm coming out with more content. I have a video dropping later this week on Deonte Banks, who should be a first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.